guys are great.
That's why. Which also might be one to show us.
So I don't think the climate one.
Yeah, like you share that text. Now I checked yesterday and I
We'll really find out what it has like for us. So,
You know how long it is?
yeah,
Okay, the one in John
I think she has to, as long as they answer criteria stuff.
The class is only 50 minutes.
No, yeah.
You want it.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, and she said a lot of those questions are just like quiz questions.
So I like, I feel
I
know, I didn't, I was really, they were short answers, but like, they really should.
No, I didn't.
So Christy and I
Oh,
were
you
left.
couldn't even see
So
it.
like I couldn't see them at all.
I was like, okay,
Maybe just the way
like, I could leave it with like 2 sentences, but I'm gonna keep going, so I was like.
All right.
I still have time, like, not even.
I also tend to ramble and I say audience because I want to make sure that my point is coming across.
Yeah, exactly, it's like, I feel like I just said this, yeah, but maybe it wasn't clear, don't erase it out, just one word, and make it really clear.
Maybe we should find out how serious and move up the face.
Or at the end, on my last, my hand was so cool, I was like, okay, harder sounds like I feel like I'm really putting myself on. But at the end, I was so mad, and I said, like, I remember what I wrote for like, our ex thing. I was like, no, like, one of the perfected 5 C's, that's the love, it's like, yeah, and at the end, I was like,
She literally gave me this exact answer.
And there's people,
So why the short?
but there's also no wrong, like, yeah, so I was really like, at the end, but I'm just gonna wrap it up. These are the reasons. I mean, I'm just really something like that, but I was like, I had to get cleared up the rest of I like that water bottle.
What's going on, man? I've been seeing you with your hair down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Try not to let it down too much because it's just in my face.
Yeah.
And I also don't know. I was gonna like, no, I was gonna watch it, but probably like see if it was anything.
Ron, how'd that test go?
My note card is
To stack?
yeah.
Hey, it's a good thing you're studying.
25 hours before.
That helps listeners. That was good.
Yeah.
What's up, dude? I don't think I'm gonna go at 2 today. I think I'm gonna go at 3, just so I can take an hour and actually warm up.
Would you give a cat a cupcake?
Oh, I like that.
So my father's group, so I run a Father's Read Every Day program within Anoka County, Washington Head Start. And so this was our book this month. We did a cupcake theme and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, oh, it's in my other folder. So it's in your class folder. So that was it's kind of funny. Just wanted to make sure that we are, this is the stuff. Okay. Just paying attention to our vocabulary pieces, the lexicon, the glossary that I sent out. From time to time, you may want to, yeah, here it is. I was like, I knew I had it in my packet. You may want to check off some of these things as we talk about them in class, just to kind of jog your memory and know that we're kind of marching through a lot of that stuff. So, so cool. So make sure you pay attention to that from time to time. Again, between my job is not to trick or to fool you or anything like that. So everything that you'll find on assessments and even the final will be stuff that we've covered in class or things that I've passed out to you. So pay attention to those. Anyone like to lead us in prayer? Got more patience than a broke bartender.
Heavenly Father, I thank you for today. Thank you that we could all be in class today. I pray that you'll just let us learn through our professor today and just let us learn through all the classes. And I pray that you'll just give us a good day and that's all.
Amen. Thanks. One thing to remember, particularly when you're in class, when you're teaching, is that you're not sure what mindset your students are coming from, right? So what they've been taught by their parents and that kind of stuff. And part of our responsibility is to build relationships with the parents so that we become they become a part of the education team for their students, right? So a practice that I would do, and for us, this prayer is part of it. So here's something interesting, and I don't know how many people have been in schools as as an adult now. Anyone doing any practicums or what? Okay, cool. There is a trend that I find very interesting. It's an interesting trend that. Have any of the schools you've been in had in-school suspension? Any of those schools? Okay, cool. And I don't know if it's happened in any of your schools, and I haven't been in a school that this has happened, right? So I'm reading these reports, but I'm also very curious about this particular thing. So one thing that they do in these, that they're starting to do in-school suspension is have meditation. Being mindful. In any of the schools that you've been in, is that part of the in-school suspension stuff? No? Okay. All right. Which I think is very interesting because meditation is what? What is meditation as it's being sold? What typically is it related to when people kind of talk about this idea of meditation? Yes.
Kind of like self-regulation almost.
Yep, kind of self-regulation. What else? Yes.
It's a way to connect your spirit and body.
It's a good way to connect your spirit and body. And what context do people typically talk about this idea of meditation?
In yoga class,
Say that again.
in yoga class,
Yeah, in yoga class they do it, right? So typically when we're in a public school setting and they're starting these practices, they say we're going to meditate, which is a yoga practice, and we know that yoga is it's not just a physical activity, but it's actually a spiritual practice as well, right? So that's interesting. However, so we can meditate in schools, right? So there are even classes on yoga, there are classes on other things. But what can we so-called not do in school? Pray. We can meditate, but we can't pray. So I find it interesting that we're not excited to take the opportunity to do it where we can, because there are tons of places where we can't. I find that interesting, right? Because in other places, and it's funny because you'll also hear this kind of talk as well. And I want you to think about what this talk means, right? So people will say, have you ever heard someone say, we can't talk about politics in the classroom, or we can't talk about politics in this particular context or that context? Has anyone ever heard someone say that? You're right. Wrong. Wrong. Have you ever heard someone say, we can't talk about religion? Like we can't talk about religion in this space, in this context. Anyone ever heard that? Right? Wrong. Do people talk about their dates in those same contexts? Yeah, they do. Right? What I did last weekend, I saw this movie, I checked this dude on hockey, they talk about all this kind of stuff. We can talk about those things as well. And we have to. And people will say, let's not talk about race. Have you ever heard someone say that, like, or the topic of race comes up and people try to avoid it, right? I would say that politics, religion, and race are extremely important. But for some strange reason, we pride ourselves on not being able to talk about stuff that's important. And part of that comes from our mental models, our paradigms. We're going to talk about mental models and paradigms today, right? But no, you can talk about those things. What can't I do in the discussion? I can talk about them, but what can't I do in that discussion? I can't tell them what to believe. I can say, this is what I believe, and this is how I live, and this is my stuff, right? But I can't say that you have to do what I do, or you have to be like me. Even if I believe it in my heart, I can't say it, right? Anyone ever seen Princess Bride? Anyone raise your hand if you've seen Princess Bride. I love Princess Bride, love it. Although I find it interesting, didn't notice it, but I noticed it one day. There are no black people in the whole movie. That was kind of weird, but I love this movie, love it, right? So here's the thing about Princess Bride. Farm boy, fetch me some water. And what did he say? As you wish. Farm boy, saddle my horse. As you wish. And as he was saying, as you wish, what was he also saying? You can say it. I love you. Right? He was saying, I love you. So as you're having these conversations with folks, you don't have to tell them. You just have to give it to them. Right? So we'll talk more about how to do that stuff. So this idea of mental models. So I want to, we'll start out with CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy. And cognitive behavior therapy is a philosophy of therapy really built on this idea. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to put up here. I knew it was one more. No? Oh. All right, there it is. Because it was gnawing on my brain. I was like, there was one more in my notes. All right, so cognitive behavior therapy is a way to help people self-regulate, right? It's a way to help people look at their behavior and be critical about the kinds of behaviors that they have. So when we have, and that these behaviors are goal-directed. So give me some examples of emotions. So what are some emotion words? Emotion words. Happy. What else? Love. Emotion words. Angry.
Excited.
Excited.
sad, right? So these are emotion words, right? So emotions are we'll talk about that in just a second. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. So emotions are those feelings that people have. Thoughts are the images, the foundation of belief systems, and we'll get to that too in just a second. So emotions are the mental pictures one has in one's head. Emotions are the feelings associated with that mental picture, right? And these thoughts are extremely important because the clearer you can be in articulating communication, a particular emotion that you'll get, right? So let me add one more thing to this. So human communications, how do we communicate as human beings? What are some of the ways in which we communicate?
Talking.
Yeah, so we talk, right? So we talk and we use words when we talk. What else?
Through emotions.
So through emotions. So
Your own like motions, like nonverbal.
oh, so nonverbal. Okay, so nonverbal. So use words, nonverbal.
Through writing.
Through writing. So we also write. And I'm going to put next to writing pictures, right? So we draw and all that kind of stuff, right? And I would suggest that we do a fourth way as well. And that the fourth way is actually related to the first three. Which is the fact that we have superpowers. So growing up, one of the, so I like comic books. One time we moved into a house and they took everything, out of the house except they had this big window seat. And in my child's mind, it seemed really, really big. It probably was only like this big. But in my child's mind, it was like this big. And it was full of comic books. And so we opened this thing up, and I'm like, wow, look at this. This is so cool, all these comic books. And we go through the comic books, and then I found a group of comic books that spoke to me specifically. They must have wrote these comic books just for me. And the comic books were called, the title of the comic books were the X-Men. So the X-Men. Because as a little kid, I wanted superpowers. Anybody else want superpowers as a little kid? What if you could pick a superpower, what would it be? What would be your superpower? Low threshold question, no risk. All right. Teleportation. So you'd be like, bam, and be over here and over there, right? Or somebody else. Flying. So would you like wear like a little tight outfit, or just like how you are now? Just be like.
Probably the tight outfit, right? Aerodynamics.
Oh yeah, aerodynamics, right? Yeah, walking around looking like the swimmer from the Olympics. What's his name? Yes, yeah, walking around with a little shark skin stuff on, right? Like, one thing I am proud about, I'm happy that they dropped the underwear on the outside thing and a lot of the comic book stuff and the movies, because that's just kind of weird, when you're underwear on the outside. One more superpower. Healing, right? So you just, in your so would you use like a shadow like Paul? You know my shadow king? Your hands? Okay, cool. So I wanted a superpower too. But the superpower I wanted was telepathy. The coolest dude in the group back then was the dude in the wheelchair, right? Because he could manipulate stuff with his mind. He could move stuff and he could talk to people in his mind. Until I realized that all human beings have that. We all have that ability. And I would suggest that's the primary way that we communicate. We send telepathically my thoughts to you. And these become tools. Let me give you an example. So, just close your eyes for a second. I'm going to say a word. And I want you to tell me what comes up for you when I say this word. The word is apple. Open your eyes. What came up for you when I said the word apple? A picture of an apple. What did it look like?
Mine's red.
You had a red apple. All right? Sorry. Right? So a red apple. Anybody have a different color apple?
Green.
Green apple. So we got red. We got green. What else?
I saw an apple tree.
You saw an apple tree. Sweet. An apple tree. You may see an apple computer. Yeah, that's what you said. There's one in every group. There's one in every group, right? Did anybody see an apple with a stem? Okay, cool. Anybody see an apple with a leaf? Anybody see an apple with a shiny spot on it? You did? Okay. Cool. Anybody see an apple with a bite out of it? No? Anybody see an apple with a worm? No? Okay. Anything else about the apple that you saw? Anything else about it? Speckle, spot, solid red, solid green, multicolored. Anybody have a multicolored apple? No Honeycrisp folks up in the crib? All right. So how is it that some folks came up with green and some folks came up with red, some folks had a leaf or a stem or didn't have a leaf or a stem, shiny spot or not, or a tree, blah, blah, blah. How did that happen? How did it happen? So past experience. Folks made associations with this image with what? This image associated with what? The word apple, right? So even at a small age, you know that A is for apple, B is for, whatever. So A, B, C, and always, right? So apple and the word apple with this particular image, right? So what if I had said rotten apple? Would you have had a different picture? Why? Because it's rotten, right? So the association with rotten and apple changes the image that you see. So if I'm not particular or specific in my language, then I may not be getting across the images from my mind to yours, right? So an example. What did I just say to you? You have no idea. Why? Because you don't have a picture for the words. And the picture you do have is racist. I'm just saying. I'm joking. People are like, what? No, I'm not. I'm really. No. It's all. I was just joking, right? So when we go to another country where they speak another language, What's the biggest challenge in going to that country where they speak a language that you're not familiar with?
Don't know what they're saying.
You don't know what they're saying because you don't have what?
Experience.
Pictures of those words, right? You can't associate pictures with those words. No, you're doing great. I love it.
Thank you.
Love it, love it, love it. Get extra points as a matter of fact.
Yay, thank
All right,
you.
cool, no problem. So emotions plus thought dictate behaviors, but how we communicate those using words, nonverbals, we write pictures, and ultimately to pass one set of thoughts from my mind to your mind, right? So those things become important. And so what we recognize is that how someone feels and the things that they're thinking will dictate their behaviors, right? They will dictate their behaviors. Question, yes?
Is it just us or it can be?
Ways that humans communicate? Yes, there can be.
Okay, we're just doing
Yep, I was just trying to get to the telepathy part, right? That we're just passing images from one person to another. But there are more ways in which people can communicate. Yep. So emotions plus thought dictate behaviors. Now, 1964 Civil Rights Act said what about behaviors? What did the Civil Rights Act of 1964 suggest about human behaviors? What about human behaviors did the 64 Civil Rights Act suggest? We talked about this. We said it served two purposes. What were the two purposes of the 64 Civil Rights Act? It had two functions. What's that?
Integration
So the first was,
and segregation.
yep. So it ended segregation, and it defined discrimination. So those are the two things that it did. So in terms of behaviors, the 1964 Civil Rights Act said that we're ending segregation. So there's no more the separate but equal stuff, right? And it was 10 years earlier, it was that piece of legislation was made possible by the 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education, right? And 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education did what as a precursor to the Civil Rights Act? What did it do? So Brown versus the Board of Education simply said there was a policy that said there's a policy that said separate but equal. Separate but equal. And what do you think was meant by that when they said separate but equal? When they were talking about separate but equal?
They had to go to school separately, but they could have equal education.
Yep, this idea that they could go to school separately and have equal education, that we have white water fountains here, black water fountains there. They both have water fountains and they're both separate. But what did they start realizing about these schools that folks were going to? It wasn't equal. And that particularly in the South, this idea of separate but equal was that separate could never be equal. Particularly given the racial climate that had been set up in the South, right? So we know that Reconstruction really kept playing itself out even to this level. And so in 1964, the Civil Rights Act is signed because Brown versus the Board of Education killed this idea of separate but equal, and they started school integration. Now, the funny thing is, so here we go, 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education. In 1964, we have the Civil Rights Act. Now, I go to school in no, it was 78, right? And we're still trying to get this 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education thing going. I participated in a program called busing that was trying to undo all this Brown versus the Board of Education. So they took all the kids who looked like me from my neighborhood, put us on buses, took us across town to go to a school across town with all the same kids from the neighborhood. And those kids from that neighborhood got bused to another school, so it was just kind of an interesting switching, but nothing really changed. You know, it was interesting. So there's that. So Brown versus the Board of Education, separate but equal, but separate. The court said separate can't be equal, right? So that became important. We recognize that images play an important part. So this idea of emotions plus thought dictates behaviors. So we've talked about this before, this concept, but if I'm walking down the hallway and a classmate grabs me on the butt and squeezes and we're not on the softball team together, we have a problem, right? And what is that problem called? It's called sexual harassment, right? And so there are policies and procedures that go down this path, and for the most part, all of those are monitored or impacted by the law, right? By the law. Now, what if the person who I don't know, who I don't have a relationship with, who grabbed me, in the course of us going through this legal procedure says, I was just joking. You can't take a joke. Does that change anything? It doesn't change a thing, right? Why? Because the law is enacted, all right? So 1964 Civil Rights Act and following laws, and we'll talk about some of those a little bit later, said that we will take care of behaviors. The government said, I will take care of behaviors. You will be safe. You will, Title IX will be enacted, so our sisters can sit right next to us and get the same quality education that everyone else gets. Title IX started out just with sports, but moved into the classroom for equality in all courses, but particularly STEM courses or STEAM courses, as a lot of schools are starting to adapt the arts as a part of that. That's original STEM. And so the law says that. So whose responsibility is it to deal with these emotions and these thoughts? As classroom teachers, are you dealing with the law? Are you supposed to engage the law? Is that what you're supposed to be doing? Is fighting so-called discrimination using legal practices in your classroom? Is that what you're doing? No, right? Your job is to change hearts and minds. First, starting with your own, but ultimately with your students, creating a climate where their hearts and minds can be engaged so that you get the kind of behaviors that you want. So to get to that stuff, we have to kind of talk about these mental models, right? So mental models are the foundations of paradigms. And what are paradigms? Or what is a paradigm? Should be in your notes.
How you view everything.
Yeah, how you view everything, right? So these mental models are really important. And we're going to talk about two categories of these mental models. And I'm going to give you this because you'll start to see these things carried through the rest of the course and our conversation. So there's some mental models of the self that are important to recognize. So the ones that are not helpful are these thoughts that generate particular sets of emotions, right? So these thoughts that students are helpless, that they're dependent, that they're depressive, and ultimately they're destructive. So these mental models, these thoughts aren't helpful. Why is that? Why might these thoughts not be helpful? Are they inspiring? Anyone inspired by those? Why might these not be helpful from a student's point of view? Because they're all negative, right? And if I have these negative thoughts, ultimately, what's my behavior going to be like? I'm going to have very negative behavior. Very negative behavior, right? So let's talk about some of the emotions that are attached to this idea of helplessness. So what might be some emotion words that we might attach to this idea of helplessness? What are some emotions that might be attached to this? What's that? Despair, right? So despair might be being paralyzed, right? This idea of being paralyzed. I don't know what to do. I can't do it. I can't, blah, 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 blah. One of the things that really upsets me about my daughter, and I don't know where she got it from, is that she keeps saying stuff. She's like, I can't. And I'm like, you can. Like, it's a Ziploc bag. You can open it. She's like, I can't, Dad. Open it. I'm like, no, I'm not opening it for you. You need to be able to do it, right? So here's some other feeling words I'll give you. This idea of being defective, right? Being a feeling of being exploited, being helpless, that everything's outside of your control. You can't control anything. Being overwhelmed, that everything is larger than you. And what do you think are some of the behaviors associated with this idea of being helpless? So how would this manifest? So we have the thought of being helpless. We have the emotion of being helpless. What might be some of the behaviors that manifest themselves in terms of someone feeling helpless? So they wouldn't try. What else would they might not do? What else might they do because they feel this despair, they feel this inadequacy, everything's bigger than them, they don't try. What else do they not do? Or what do they do, rather? So write this down. So blame. So people who are in this emotional state, they blame. They also procrastinate. They waste time. And they threaten other people. So dependent, we're still talking about this idea of emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. So people who are dependent, they feel useless. Why do they feel useless? When they're in this dependent thought pattern. I can't do this unless you help me. I need my, educational assistant with me so that I can do this, right? So they feel guilty. Dependent people feel guilty because they feel like they're taken away from something else. They feel frustration, resentment, and oftentimes bitterness. So when people are dependent, what kinds of behaviors do you think come up out of this idea of emotions and these thoughts? What kinds of behaviors? When they're dependent. Dependent people manipulate. They play games. Why? What do you think that is? It allows them to have some control, right? They don't see themselves as having stuff, so if I want to get what I need, I have to manipulate someone to get it. They're also seductive. The people who are dependent are seductive, and they seek special privileges. Just do this just for me, right? Folks who have this depressive mindset, some of their feelings are a feeling of loathing or shame or despair, or they have self-anger. And when people are depressive, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I remember when I had the blues, I was depressed, and the state of depression repels people, which reinforces my depression. So one of the things I didn't do when I had the blues, I was depressed, I was sad. It wasn't clinical depression, but I was really, really sad, and a deep hurt had occurred, was I wouldn't shower or change my clothes. This happened for like 2 days. What do you think my friends and family said about me not showering? Did they want to be around me not showering or no, right? Which reinforced my depressiveness. And so some of those feelings of self-loathing or shame, some of the behaviors. So if I feel shamed and the emotion is shame, and my thought pattern is this idea of being depressed. When I meet a challenge, how do I deal with that challenge? How do I deal with that challenge? I don't. I give up, right? So depressive folks give up. And then destructive folks, you can imagine what the feelings are with that. Like what? So if I'm feeling destructive, what kinds of emotions are going? Anger, right? And what kind of behaviors come out of that? Of being aggressive, right? Unproductive, engaging in power struggles, right? And then ultimately trying to hurt self or others. Right? So here are the ones that are helpful. These are helpful mindsets to us, right? It's this idea of being competent. And competent is saying, I'm able to do this. I may not know everything, but I can get the resources to do it. I'm capable of doing these things. And The emotion is this feeling of being able to do things, right? Being able to do things. And so what do you think the behaviors are of someone who is competent or they feel that they're able to do things? Proud, right? So they may be proud, they feel that they can achieve, that they can understand, right? So that's absolutely important. So this idea of creative. So creative people have optimistic. So they have this feeling of optimistic. So being creative, it generates this emotion of optimism, right? And so ultimately, what is the behavior that comes out of this optimism? If I meet a challenge and this thing doesn't work, what does this creative and this optimism say? So I did this thing and it didn't work. Ah! I could try something different, right? So the creative and the optimistic gather together to give the opportunity to try and do different things, right? This idea of healing and nurturing. And this healing or nurturing is the emotion that gets stirred up in that is this idea of empowering. And what does empowering mean? And I underline power for a reason. The concept of empowering is to do what? You've heard the word empower before, right? So what does that mean?
Giving people the means to get something done.
Yeah, giving people the means to get something done, right? So this idea that your students can be healing or empowering, that they can help other people get things done, right? And then the behaviors would be these behaviors of service, being of service to other people, right? Being helpful, being a contributor. And then lastly, this idea of compassionate. And compassionate is being loving and lovable, right? One of the worst books, and it's so funny because we got 4 copies. So when my daughter was born, her first birthday, we asked people to bring books, right? So that was a great equalizer. So some people can afford big gifts and others couldn't, and that kind of stuff. But if everybody brought books, then everybody could participate in the same way, right? So we got 4 copies of The Giving Tree. Anybody ever read The Giving Tree? Right? Worst book on the planet is horrible. Why is The Giving Tree such a horrible book from an educator's point of view? What's the basic story?
The tree keeps giving and giving to the boy, but the boy never like says thank you or he's grateful for it.
The boy is never grateful. The tree gives everything to the boy, and the boy gives nothing back to the tree. What do we call that? What kind of relationship is that? Very one-sided relationship, right? We would also call it codependent, where one person is giving, and the other one's not. So at any rate, but the idea is that students who are lovable and are loving, and what do you think the behaviors are that are associated with that mindset? Engaged or disengaged? Very much engaged, right? So these mindsets of the self are extremely important. So we're going to move on to talking about these mindsets of others. Double check my time. Oh, no, let
No, well, actually, this is what I wanted to do. So here are some examples of those things in place, or the impact of those. And many of you may have seen this commercial or a commercial very similar to it. So here we go.
I always thought people were so cute when they have the little cheeks and they're like rosy, but mine are pretty plain. If I was gonna change one feature about my face, I would say that I would want fuller lips. I'm definitely a person that looks tired when I'm tired, and when people say that, I immediately am like, oh man. I'm starting to already get little crow's feet and stuff, which like my mom had, so yeah.
I'm a forensic artist. I was trained at the FBI Academy in 1993 in composite art. Worked for the San Jose Police Department as the police artist from 1995 to 2011.
We didn't really know what we were doing, so that was nerve-wracking for everyone.
I showed up to a place I'd never been and walked into this big warehouse, and at the very end there was a guy with his back to me with a drafting board.
I had a curtain separating me so that I don't see him. We'll begin. First of all, tell me about your hair.
Brown, long, I guess a little bit past my shoulders.
Your jaw.
My mom told me I had a big jaw.
Yeah, the brown eyebrows, dark brown eyebrows.
Okay.
I didn't know what he was doing, but then I could tell after several questions that he was drawing me.
Tell me about your chin.
I guess I haven't really compared it to anyone else's chin, but especially when like I smile, I just feel like it kind of protrudes a little bit.
What would be your most prominent feature?
Kind of have a fat, rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
You sort of realize, oh man, now I have to talk about myself and think about my looks.
I'm 40, so I'm starting to get a little bit of the crow's feet thing going on.
Once I get a sketch, I say thank you very much, and then they leave. I don't see them.
I still didn't know. All I had been told before the sketch was to get friendly with this other woman, Chloe.
Today I'm going to ask you some questions about a person you met earlier, and I'm going to ask you some general questions about their face.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin was a nice, thin chin.
The women were really critical about moles or scars or things like that, and yet they were describing just a normal, beautiful person.
She had nice eyes. They lit up when she spoke and were very expressive.
The length of the nose, what is that like?
It's short.
Short.
Yeah, big nose.
Her face was fairly thin.
She had blue eyes, very nice blue eyes.
Okay. So this is your self-described image? And then somebody else described you in light of this sketch.
I have this whole thing about having dark circles and crow's feet around my eyes, and that was not part of the sketch at all that the stranger did. The stranger's was a little more like gentle.
It's very different. Just very strange.
She looks closed off and fatter. Just looks kind of shut down. Sadder, too. The second one is more beautiful.
I think they're catching more of that from you?
Yeah,
Yeah. She looks more open and friendly and happy. I've come a long way in how I see myself, but I think I still have some way to go.
I have some work to do on myself.
Do you think you're more beautiful than you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Chloe's perception was so clearly different. Her picture looked like somebody I thought I would want to talk to and be friends with, like a happy, light, much younger, much brighter person. It's troubling. I should be more grateful of my natural beauty. It impacts the choices and the friends that we make, the jobs we apply for, how we treat our children. It impacts everything. It couldn't be more critical to your happiness.
Our self-perceptions are generally kind of harsh and unbecoming when really that's not how the world sees us. We spend a lot of time as women analyzing and trying to fix the things that aren't quite right, and we should spend more time appreciating the things that we do like.
So, I'd like for you to get into groups of 3. I'm going to talk about the video as well as these 2 sets of self-concepts. So how did you either see those played out in the video, or how, or what did you see kind of playing out in the video? So I'll give about 2 minutes for that conversation. So smaller groups are better just because everybody will get a chance to share. So what were some of the things you saw in the video? And how do you think those relate to these concepts that we're talking about? All right, so we'll give you 2 minutes for that.
Couldn't see themselves in the light they were. It was cool to see too the other perceptions, how they kind of empowered them. Critical. That's probably a lot very free to a lot of people. Sorry.
Cool thoughts, comments.
What'd you think?
Every time I see it, it almost makes me cry. I mean, it's just like, I don't know about anybody else, but I just think about how I see myself versus maybe how other people see me. Anybody else have a similar reaction at all, or a different reaction?
Can you see how these kind of mental models kind of can come into play given that particular example, right? So it's very interesting that as teachers, this is where we have to keep showing our students this, because the world keeps showing them this. How they're inadequate, you're not good enough, you're blah, 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 blah. But as teachers, particularly when we talk about this idea of creating a classroom that has equity, we have to keep telling our students, you are competent, you are able, and then look and reward them when we see the behavior acted out, right? Because if not, the world is constantly doing those things. And what we see and what they see, I don't know, anybody been on a sports team, played sports, right? What's the great thing about coaches? What's the great thing about one of your coaches? Encouragers, right? What are they encouraging?
Just the beauty of the game and how it's joy is supposed to bring all
Yep, so the beauty of the game, they're encouraging the beauty of the game. What else are they encouraging? You ever had a coach get in there and be like, look, I need 5 more or whatever, right? And you're like, Coach, I don't have any more of that. And they're like, no, you can give me 5 more. And they're like, and then finally you kind of give them those 5 more, and you're like, right? And the coach is like, I knew. What did they say? I knew you could do it. And they knew it when you didn't know, right? And maybe they did or didn't know, but they certainly encourage you to be bigger, better, stronger, faster, gentler, kinder, sweeter than you knew yourself. That's the great thing about being a parent. You try to do that, right? Sometimes you get a little too close. You can't be as objective as you need to. Speaking from personal experience. So then so these are the things that are helpful for the self. This idea of the things that we need to be mindful, mental models that we need to be mindful of in terms of working with others, is this idea of diversity versus low standards. And that's a false statement, because diversity is not against low standards. Oftentimes diversity is looking for different standards. We talked a little bit, and we'll speak more about this idea of charter schools who don't have all of the so-called advantages that big public schools are supposed to have. But the parents send their kids there for a reason, and we'll talk more about that. This idea of affirmative action versus reverse discrimination. And what is reverse discrimination? As people talk about it, have you heard people talk about this idea of reverse discrimination? What are they talking about when they say it? Everybody who's heard you say it, you can say it's okay.
Isn't like being so anti-discriminatory towards one group that you're inadvertently discriminating another?
Say what group they're talking about when they say it. Because they're not just talking about groups, they're talking about specifics.
Like a race of people, or like...
Even more specific than that when they say, because I don't hear black people talking about reverse discrimination.
So yeah, usually they're trying to be so anti, like a group of white people trying to be anti-discriminated towards a different group, minority, black, African American group, and the opposite effect ends up happening when
That's
white
right.
people complain.
So it's this idea that, so reverse discrimination is this idea that white people are being negatively affected by discriminatory practices. And the one that the people typically refer to is this idea of affirmative action, right? So, and you'll hear people say really strange stuff. Like you'll hear people say, well, I didn't get that scholarship because they gave it to ... Right? So I didn't get the scholarship because they gave it to a woman. Or I didn't get the scholarship because they gave it to a Mexican. Or I didn't get the scholarship, blah, blah, blah. Have you heard people tell those kinds of stories, right? Or I didn't get the promotion because they gave it to this person, or I didn't even get the job because they gave it to, they had some kind of affirmative action stuff. Has anyone ever heard people talk like that? Okay, cool. This is the thing that I want you to be mindful of. You have to interrupt those conversations. You have to interrupt them because they're built on myths. And here's the myth. Please raise your hand if you've ever applied for a job. Please raise your hand if you've applied for a job, right? So you fill out the application form, you send it into an employer. Please raise your hand if a job that you applied for that you did not get. Raise your hand if you did not get the job that you applied for. So everybody, is there a job that you've applied for that you didn't get? So you've gotten every job, those who didn't raise your hand, that you've applied for. That's sweet. Go ahead. Come rub my application, right? All right, so for those of us who have applied for a job, didn't get the job, how were you notified that you didn't get the job? So sometimes they just don't contact you, right? They're just like, we're not even going to waste the stamp on this or the email, the time to email, right? This job is so unworthy that we don't even care, right? So how else are people contacted? So some people aren't contacted, but when you are, what is the contact like? So sometimes they call you, right? Early in my career, they would send you a letter, right? I've also gotten emails saying, and what did that call sound like? What was the script of the call? Yep, and usually they say stuff like, your qualifications did not match up with our job thing. Anybody got something similar to that? And so, okay. Or, we decided to go a different direction with this position, and you are not worthy all that kind of stuff, right? I've never gotten a letter, and I've applied for a number of jobs throughout my career, but I've never gotten a letter that said, we regret to inform you that because we are hiring left-handed people, you did not meet the qualifications that we needed to fit our quota of left-handed people. Never got that letter. Never gotten a letter that said, because we're going to hire you because you fit our quota for, tall, handsome black people. We need tall, handsome black people, so you fit that quota, so we're going to hire you. Never got that letter. So how is it that people that say that so-called affirmative action is reverse discrimination, that they didn't get the job that way, how do they have top secret information? How do they get this inside scoop on why they didn't get the application? I mean, why they didn't get the job or the scholarship? How do they get that information? They're making assumptions, right? And when you make assumptions, you make not out of me. You're not making nothing out of me, right? No. So you have to interrupt that because reverse discrimination doesn't happen, but discrimination happens.
So people can still be discriminated against, but this idea of reverse discrimination does not happen, right? So that's important. This idea of individualism versus collectivism. Has anyone read any of Ayn Rand's books at all? I'd encourage you to do it, even if you don't agree with her, because I don't agree with her, but it was good to know what I don't agree with. So she wrote a book called The Fountainhead, and another one's called Atlas Shrugged. And it really is this idea of a rugged individualist. You can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and that your idea, your thing is the most important thing on the planet. The problem is, Michael Jordan has never, Kobe Bryant has never, LeBron James has been close, but they've never won a they're the best at what they do, but they've never won a game by themselves, right? Never won a game by themselves. And so this idea of the individual being prepared and being successful and being great is super, but it should be individualism should have a relationship with collectivism. And collectivism says that we as a people move forward together, that we can be helpful to each other together. This idea that disagreement equals disengagement. You should have Facebook friends that you do not agree with, because they help you to be critical in your thinking. I refer to those people as frenemies. I have tons of frenemies, right? So there's that, this either or thinking, this us or them thinking, the idea of racial orthodoxy, yeah, I did it right, orthodoxy, which is that there is a racial hierarchy in the United States. Anyone seen Blackish, the television show Blackish? Yep, it's a hit and miss for me. So sometimes I watch it, sometimes I don't, because sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's offensive, so it's a hit and miss thing. But they had this thing where they had they were having the holiday party, and at the holiday party, they were trying to decide who was going to be the new Santa Claus. And so the dad, who's black, African American, goes up to the boss and says, "Hey, look, when you think about Santa Claus, I want you to think outside of the box. Think outside of the box." Because what was he doing? What was he trying to do with the boss? He's African American. The last Santa Claus and the Santa Claus before that was white. So what is he trying to do to the boss around the Santa Claus thing?
Change the paradigm.
He's trying to change his paradigm because he wants to be the Santa Claus. And so the boss says, "You know what? I was thinking about that, and you know what? I am going to do it." And so he says to the staff at the water cooler at lunchtime, he says, "We have changed who's going to be Santa Claus this year." And so the dad gets all excited, and the guy says, "Juanita Lopez from HR will be the Santa this year." And the black guy gets upset. Why? Because of the racial orthodoxy. He said, first it's supposed to be a white dude, then it's a black dude, then it's a woman, and then it's a Hispanic. Right? So he fell into this idea of racial orthodoxy. The rest of these last two, micro inequities and implicit bias, we'll talk about on Wednesday. So thank you so much. We actually got through most of my notes. So have a great day. Yeah, well, here we go. Oh, okay, yeah.
I wasn't because in an context.
Culture and context.
That was
That's the carrot piece. The carrot piece. Have we done that yet? No. Okay. So no.
Okay. All right. So those must have been like an idea. So you went on from here to there about 1954 versus board of education, and then talked about.
I told you, I'm gonna keep it for 6 months, and then I'm gonna get back.
Yeah, I gave her her bear. I found her and she said she's gonna be working.
Separate, but yeah.
And then I told her,
So that did not
how much you want to bet? You're gonna say my back.
Yeah, those things are related.
Well, I worked
Yeah, so I should have just erased
in my
that.
pocket. I didn't have a pocket for that day.
the reason why.
Yes, okay. How many you want to go?
gonna say,
What do you mean by law here?
because I would've been able to.
Well, I didn't put it in my pocket, I didn't have
Oh,
pockets.
sure.
I've had that bear has been out of control for over.
The Civil Rights,
Okay,
Civil Rights
okay,
Act,
okay.
right? So this,
Yeah.
I'll just text you after this class.
so law, government, all that stuff.
Bear.
The sense of force and
You're
arrest
gonna
is the,
get
is the beginning of that stuff.
Yeah,
but-
and you mean by this behavior, mean like the civil, is that
No, I'm gonna go up
it's,
to Miss Berry. And
um,
I'm gonna say, hey, Miss Berry, let me tell you a story.
it's that
Yeah.
behavior, like you said, behavior is emotion.
But then I'm gonna go put it
thoughts,
away in the back.
and then our emotions and thoughts about race and discrimination.
Nope, just the behaviors.
Look at the bears.
Okay,
This stuff
equals what?
is for us.
Okay.
As
Yeah,
people.
no, it's a math bear.
The law will only deal with this. The law will not deal with that.
Talking to me?
So for example, I can be a Klansman,
Phonemic awareness.
right? I have the right to be a Klansman, wear an outfit, walk around, do my little Klan thing. But I can't hurt somebody because of my Klanness,
Right.
right? So I can be, I can hate people. I can have a particular ideology about people,
But you cannot.
but I cannot hurt people.
That's where you brought the idea of like you can express what you feel. You know, I know what your beliefs are, but you cannot do things or what you do.
That's right.
Okay.
So, yep, so we can have discussions in our workplace. I have a feeling about that, but I can't preach or push my stuff on other people.
Yep. Okay. And I have this like
Yeah. Yep, no, that's good. That's right. That is absolutely right. Yep. So emotions plus thoughts dictate behaviors. But the law does not dictate emotions or thoughts, but we do know that behaviors are made up of these two.
But the law dictates what you believe there is.
The law can dictate your behavior because it can't dictate these two things, but it can dictate that.
You would know nothing
That's where
about that.
I was just trying to understand the flow of
Yeah.
things. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem, man.
Yeah, you could probably go on that.
You guys have a 4-page paper?
Research paper for kindergarten education.
Oh, sweet, sweet, sweet.
Last semester, my execution ended up being like 16 pages. Something. 11. Yeah. Just having that done.
Have you guys done CBT work at all? Cognitive behavior therapy?
Not that
In
I,
your
not
elementary?
that I remember. It's really interesting.
Yeah, we do some of that with our families at Head Start. Cool beans. No, that Dove commercial always makes me.
I've never seen that before, it was really good.
Yeah, there's a couple of other ones that will also kind of deal with.
No, I'm just trying to use something. Try the, there's like a pencil thing that shows up, I don't know if that will help. But usually when I just click the number, it will. Yeah, it's not. And I'm trying to look for the combination, trying to see what it's like, how it for you to come in, like. Yeah. Mine is only 5%. No, I don't have much light. And then how the light Yes. I would say just like somewhere.
No problem, I'll see you on Wednesday.
Oh, I don't know why. thought it was going for second. She's just trying to open for playground. What is this? I have no idea. I think that's just download to it. But you can try it. I don't think it's really easy. I think you guys are right. I think you can. Is it doing midnight? I think you
She
can.
just recommends
But you
certain
need-
sources that you use.
you
So like you
also
have to have NRP.
You need to have that one.
You can add in her PowerPoint with the summary of NRP, even though it covers the same thing. You can do the fundamentals textbook. I did FCRR, the Florida Center on Reading Research, is one of my sources.
I just got all my information from the article. It's an NRP summary article that's on the book. I got all my information from there.
Okay.
So. I like how that was organized, and I just used any points to that. So I really enjoyed that.
So do I still have like a reference page then? Oh, I put one on there.
Well, I think if you use, she said, in text citations rather than a references page, but I'm assuming if you use outside sources.
I have a feeling she's not going to take off points for having a reference.
Yeah, and if you use outside sources, I think you should, but I only used that one, and it made it seem like if you're only using that, you
Yeah.
don't use it.
I just find it so much fun. According to Linda Probert.
As she's reading it.
She often do it, like a professor, you do training people's work and then people reference yourself. And I'm like, oh, okay. I hope I reference this right.
As a professor, it's really cool though. You're like, oh, they're listening. Oh my God. Oh, yes. Just to butt in.
Oh, yeah, we should.
Or we should
all
bring
bring
our
our
own
own
answer.
That's a long ways away and it's raining. And I have night class tonight, so I have to carry it with me until like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, that'd be honest.
Just,
I have a fan.
because it's hot in one of the classes, but I could go back to exactly. Like, I have a class that's very important. And that's it.
You guys know what you're doing this summer? Yeah, I feel like it's starting to get like, where I guess, people are starting to make decisions and stuff. Oh my God, sorry. I'm thankful that the job I've had since the summer, they just send me email and you have to say if you want to return or if you don't want to return. And what position it's like.
Me too, I have that as well as the spot that I worked the past couple of summers, but I just want to see different, like, get a different perspective. But also, since coming to Bethel, I realized how many things they're doing there that they're not supposed to be doing. And I'm just like, I feel awkward trying to bring it up and say, hey, FYI, that's not legal.
No, it's okay. I have to apologize. Yeah, I have to apologize for not having this board cleared off. I was
We have plenty of people that can help for resources.
Yeah, we're talking with the students.
And I don't write on the board at all. Isn't that
Oh, okay.
interesting how we just do things? But do you prefer whiteboards or chalkboards?
Whiteboard.
Do you?
Yeah, I
See, and I like whiteboards as long as they have good markers, but I can't
Yes.
stand it if they just dry so, oh, there's only one eraser there. Yes, my dear.
So I can't
Oh,
open
yeah.
it.
Well,
It won't.
when I
It's
clicked
after a
on it,
certain
it
number
didn't
of times,
show.
so I
I'm
think
trying to think if
Is there any way that like you can
Just
insert
see.
it for me so
I don't
when
know
I'm
that,
reading-
I didn't open yours up,
Okay.
I opened somebody else's up, and when I discovered that one, she had just attached all her strategies to it, so that's why it went so high.
Well,
But when
mine,
you click on that,
I think mine's just because of the quote type, but I don't
but,
know because I can't
well,
see
but the
it.
thing is, it excludes quotes.
It does.
Yep, 'cause
I didn't
have-
quote it though. I feel like I think it was from my citations.
Okay, yeah,
Because I
okay.
didn't quote anything, but.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because
I just can't
I have
open
it to
it to see it.
exclude, I can try it on here.
Okay.
I have it because it excludes quotes and it excludes like, if there's a reference page, you know, so it doesn't get that stuff because that would show up. But I can't block like strategy things.